Right now, though, it is time to join our friends just a little up north from the BerkshireEdge.com. It is the Berkshire Edge on air, and we welcome in Marcy and David. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Yes, we have sunshine.
And it is a good morning. It's beautiful out.
It is absolutely gorgeous, and you know what? The winter with a small W continues for us.
Yeah, very small W.
Yeah.
It just better just.
It didn't happen.
Well, so far it hasn't.
Well, that's right. It could happen in March. That's the only thing. It's saving it up.
There was one of these about 20 years ago, and I held my breath.
And what happened?
It worked.
Well, she's still here, so obviously.
It worked, and it was a winter with a small W. And then, of course...
I prefer a winter with a big W, actually. I mean, after all,
it is winter. That's right.
Well, listen, don't count your chickens, because I can remember March snowstorms
that
were fairly ferocious.
They're just as miserable to go through in March as they are in February.
That's right.
And then April surprises. Yeah. Those are
all right. Well, let us get on to the list of stories, because, folks, when we talk here about what we talk about at the BerkshireEdge.com, this is just a snapshot of a few of the stories that you're going to find there 24 hours a day. So we'll start off once again. W.E.B. Du Bois. Once again, it seems it's always his time in Great Barrington, the area.
Well, it's true. There are a lot of stories about W.E.B. Du Bois, but don't forget he is our most famous son.
And dominating the headlines many, many, many years after his demise.
Well, there's a lot going on.
With us, anyway.
Yeah. There are other other publications that ignore him completely.
Absolutely. Well,
it is coming, it is Black History Month in February, and we have an annual W.E.B. Du Bois Legacy Festival every year.
And this year it's going to be at Simon's Rock.
And it's this week.
This coming Saturday.
Right.
And it's in a collaboration this year with Jacob's Pillow. So the dance center in Beckett. So it's going to be a little larger celebration, and it's in honor of his 152nd birthday, something like that. So, but Du Bois was a wonderful writer, and he grew up here. We should remind our listeners.
But this is going to be a very interesting event because, first of all, there is an exhibit at the Mason Library, which is the public library in downtown Great Barrington, and then on this Saturday at 1:30 in the afternoon at the First Congregational Church in Great Barrington,
where he was a congregant.
Yes, that's right. And where they have often tried to pretend that or forget him. But anyway, there's a revival of interest. But anyway, they're going to take what our writer calls a deep dive into songs, poems, and texts that made up Du Bois' 1903 book, The Souls of Black Folk. Mm-hmm. There's going to be a trumpet and voice performance, a community read, a book discussion will follow, and then Saturday night at Simon's Rock College here, Bard College at Simon's Rock, there'll be another very interesting performance with a San Francisco-based choreographer, director, and performance innovation who's going to do an installment called Between Me and the Other World, which is an exploration of the souls of black folks. And it is, and then on Sunday, there's going to be a church service in Du Bois' childhood church. So there are several things, and more performances over the course of that day. So all the events are free, open to the public. Some events require registration, but you can find out all this information either on the Edge or go to the Berkshire Edge calendar and just go to Great Barrington for this weekend and see.
All right. The next story is one I even followed as a kid. This is how long that GE's been polluting our area. But the Environmental Protection Agency announced a final cleanup plan, And to me, when I saw and read your story, they're going to create a landfill, and then they're going to ship polluted stuff out of the area. It raised alarms with me, and I don't live in that area. So, and you've got down that this has created a lot of commentary on your site.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it has, and this is called the rest of the river. The cleanup of the Housatonic River, GE was brought kicking and screaming to the negotiating table with the Environmental Protection Agency, and they've been ordered. It's cost them hundreds of millions of dollars to clean up the river, but they started in Pittsfield, where the GE transformer plant had been spilling contaminated insulating oil contaminated with polychlorinated biphenyls, which is what you find in transformers to keep them from cool. Electrical transformers that are on poles. That's what was manufactured, that you see on power poles. That was what was manufactured in General Electric's plant for many years in Pittsfield. And it's quite a story about the workers that were saturated in that stuff, although it's been proven to be a carcinogenic.
And they knew it.
And GE knew it at the time. But in any case, we are still dealing with that environmental, that toxic residue, and it flowed down the river, and it impounded itself. Those PCBs impounded themselves behind dams largely, so they have to be cleaned up. And while the river right around the GE plant, or the old GE plant in Pittsfield, has been largely remediated, the rest of the river, as it's called, from Pittsfield south to the Connecticut border, had remained unremediated, and that's what GE announced it would, or the EPA has announced it would order GE to do. So that's people are. The question is, what do you do with that contaminated soil that is dredged from the river and the river banks? And so you're right. They have two plans. One was to ship the most contaminated residue out of state, and yet the less contaminated residue will be put in a lined landfill just to the east of the river, up in the mountains, in a lane construction quarry. And that's what's got people worried. Well, all of it's got people worried, but the question is whether that will eventually seep back into the environment. So it's
we have a terrific letter. This is explored quite intelligently by a letter to the editor, which we posted today from somebody named Luke Prisma, where he talks about all the things that are wrong with this. And we just realized there's a typo, but there is a meeting tonight at Lee High School, and tomorrow night, it says January, but it should say February, at Monument Mountain High School, both at 6 p.m. But, he talks in this letter about the fact that they're going to build a mountain of PCBs in the town of Lee. And GE is agreeing to pay for the hookup if people want to take themselves off of their own wells and onto town water. And that's that's the concession to people who are worried that this is going to leach in, but it will leach in. They said
eventually.
There's going to be some kind of a liner that keeps the PCBs from leaking into the groundwater, but that's not going to work.
No.
But there's also a very interesting letter from a local writer named Mickey Friedman, who's talking, which is a wonderful addition to this letter to the editor, where he says there's no scientific justification for this new PCB dump, and that Berkshire County already has 2 PCB dumps across the street from a school.
Well, that's in Pittsfield.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And he talks about a remedial technology called thermal
desorption,
which can treat PCB-contaminated sediment. And he doesn't understand why the EPA is not aware of this. And he gives a number of examples and also a link to a USAID website, because they did it in Vietnam. USAID in Vietnam treated dioxin-contaminated soil and sediment using this technology, and apparently it worked. And it broke down the dioxin compounds into non-toxic components. So, it's sad that this isn't known by our EPA, but
it's an amazing
administration that doesn't believe in environmental protection, and
it's an amazing It's an amazing story that, like I said, it's that story of PCBs and the Pittsfield plant and Housatonic River has been around since the 70s, and
yep.
David
has been very active during the whole time and pursuing it in his previous jobs and here.
It's amazing. Well, we'll move on here to the next story because I like this. It's not that simple, team of the select board members talking about the 2020 census.
Yeah.
Oh yes. We have a couple of writers that have a column and a show that we also link to, a radio show, and they call it "It's Not That Simple," and they take on issues that are facing the community, and the one that they're talking about in this particular column is the upcoming census, the 2020 census, and they're urging people to take part in it because so much of there are local aid, federal and state aid for various infrastructure projects and support from the state and local and federal government. It depends on the number. Our census account. So they're urging people to really make sure that everybody gets counted so that we get our due.
And it's been a terrible problem, because the census can't attract enough workers because there aren't, the unemployment is so low that they can't find people to work on this, even though they pay extremely well. So anybody who's listening, if they have extra time, it is a good-paying job from now until I think about September. Starts very soon, in February or March. We've been running an ad, a top banner ad in the Edge since December. But, actually, no, you apply now to start in May. It's great pay, flexible hours, and you have to, help count people. But so much rides on it.
The problem with the U.S. Census, and by the way, this will come up in your next story as well, is that it's tough enough under liberal administrations to get people who are undocumented residents to participate. But when you have an administration that is like this current administration, it's damn near impossible.
Right.
And the people that register that are undocumented, the money comes into the community to help them out by them being counted. But they're so afraid of being picked up by ICE that they're not participating in large numbers.
Well, they should be afraid, actually. They have good reason.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of problems that
Oh, yeah.
that have to be settled out, and you're right though. It's a it's a good paying job, and it's a good paying job for a reason, because there's a lot more to it than there used to be to it.
Yeah, there is. And
So let's get on to your next story though, because I think it's interesting with the changes that we've had with the changes we've had in the past 24 hours.
Right.
Alan's going to have to redo his commentary for you, because everything's just blown wide open in the Democratic race for president.
Oh, I know. Well, Alan Chartok, one of our columnists, and of course, people have heard him on WAMC, since he's the big poobah over there.
He is WAMC.
he is
WAMC.
All Alan all the time.
Well, yeah, but give him credit though.
For us. And
Yes.
he's kind of recommending Michael Bloomberg. He's touting Michael Bloomberg's candidacy for the Democratic nomination. Of course, as you say, everybody is just jumping on Bloomberg today. Not just Alan, but a lot of people are criticizing him, Bloomberg's record, and saying he can't possibly be the nominee. But
Right.
Alan Chartok is quite eloquent in trying to say, well, he's not he's a pretty good candidate for the Democrats. So
That was today's. I'd just like to interject that is today's position, and a number of people have come out today, and so it's very timely. Pre-debate, and said what they've said. You can see
what?
that Bloomberg is a good candidate.
Yeah.
Not the least of which this morning was Ed Rendell. You can see. I mean, if one is open to this sort of thing, you can definitely see the choreography, and if one is not, then it all seems just like each one is such an individual surprise.
Here's where it's bad for the Democratic Party is, once again, there's a thing called Trump derangement syndrome, which people who like Donald Trump call to people who don't like him. Well, in the Democratic Party, there's Sanders derangement syndrome,
there is.
and it's going to destroy the Democratic Party if they don't let voters be the one to decide, and if voters decide to vote for Bernie Sanders and the party goes down the hill, that's
what a voter does.
That's the
why
way it
you have
is.
voters.
The Democratic Party is in a very, very, very dangerous position here. It's going to be interesting to see how they handle it.
Right.
Well, as they say, the Democrats love to get into a circular firing squad.
This would be a circular
like
nuclear war.
This is it. This is another example.
Yeah.
With tactical handheld nuclear weapons, is this one?
Yeah, that's right. They love those too.
Well,
All right. Well,
mercy all.
Well, Bloomberg. I lived in New York when Bloomberg was mayor, and of course, the stop and frisk is definitely an issue. But otherwise, he was a terrific mayor. He and I know people who worked with him. They admired him tremendously. If something didn't work out, he said, "Okay, I've learned from this. Let's move on."
Yeah, well,
also, he's donated to, really
Many.
good causes.
Yep.
Trump has never donated to anybody other than himself.
Right.
So
You can completely make the argument.
Bloomberg at least has put his money where his mouth is.
And continues to. He was also on his watch. 311 was invented.
all right. We've only got about 5 minutes left, and we've got.
Okay.
I want to get on to at least the next story, which is we go from W.E.B. Du Bois to Abraham Lincoln's birthday.
Yeah. So this is a cute little story.
That's right.
A couple of weeks ago, we in our Bits and Bytes, or one of our columns, we announced that the Stockbridge Library had finally acquired a 3-foot-tall statue of Lincoln called the Standing Lincoln, which had been done by William Chester French?
Yeah.
Chester French. Daniel Chester French.
Yeah, and it forged right here in
Yes.
resident of Stockbridge.
Right, and in his home at Chesterwood.
His studio, because he was the one that did the statue of Lincoln for the Lincoln Memorial.
And he did a big Lincoln for the State House in Lincoln, Nebraska. So a Stockbridge resident named Jean Rousseau just gave us a little background on how this statue had been acquired, and it had been acquired by the Alumni Association of a local high school. They had bought it from William Chester French for $165, which was a very generous price because French was selling them for $1,000, and he made a number of them. And so this $165 purchase has been permanently donated to the Stockbridge Library and is on view on a pedestal. So it's just a little background to it's a sweet little
story,
bit of history about Stockbridge.
All right. Well, at Housatonic Valley High School, when I went there, there was a big statue of Abraham Lincoln, and it was the exact same statue, okay, but it was life size, and we used to think it was fun to push it around the halls and move it different places. It happened about 10 years ago. Somebody pushed it and broke it, and they had it fixed. So now they have it ensconced in glass, and Abe stays put. Abe stays put. Right. All right. I want to get to the final story.
I'm going to have to leave you in a second because I have to take my kid to school next door. So
have fun.
But this next story is about the 10 by 10 new play festival. 10 10-minute plays is what this means at Barrington Stage in Pittsfield, and this. I have to admit that I submitted a play, and it was produced at this festival a number of years ago. It was called Invasive Species.
But this is 10 plays, 10 minutes long, by 10 different playwrights, and it's at Barrington Stage. And it's running now, and we have a long article by Peter Bergman, our theater critic, describing it, and it really does sound quite wonderful. I would also I know it's not on our list, but if people are looking for things to do this weekend, besides the Dubois Festival and the 10 by 10, Close Encounters with Music is having a wonderful concert at St. James Place in Great Barrington this Saturday at 6 p.m. Now, full disclosure, I am the chair of the board of Close Encounters with Music, so of course I want to make a plug, but this is going to be, the title is Grand Piano Trios, Schubert and Brahms. And the acoustics in St. James Place are really wonderful. This is going to be a really terrific concert. So if people are looking for something classical to do on Saturday night, there is Close Encounters with Music.
All right. And we will encourage people once again, the BerkshireEdge.com, and we will speak to you guys next week.
Okay, great. Thank you. Have a good week.
Yeah. That is the Berkshire Edge on air here on Robin Hood Radio.